Welcome everyone, Simon here from the Whales of Wall Street, an IOTA video here today, IOTA on the exchange. Before we get into this one, don't forget to check out the other videos on the channel, loads of different topics, discussions, assets, you name it. Hopefully we've got it. If we haven't, let us know in the comments below if there's any tokens or assets you want us to cover, irrespective of whether we hold them in our portfolio or not. I'm always up for learning new things myself and hopefully to at least encourage even more people to come to the channel as well. So we're smashing through the subscribers, guys. If you haven't done so already, do hit that subscribe button. We're nearly towards that 10,000 mark. Absolutely massively appreciated. Hopefully everyone's learning and at least enjoying themselves on this channel as well. I know I am every day. So guys, let's go straight through to this one. First of all, before we go into the topics of IOTA, if you remember a couple of months ago, which is actually ironically the last time I did an IOTA video. Do you know what, in my head, I always think I've done them like last week. And when I see that they've been done like a month or 2 months ago, I'm like, wow, that's crazy. So the last update we did with these guys was that the fact that the European Commission, through the EBSI, which is basically the European blockchain system that they're building at the moment. We'll go into a bit more detail about that in a second. Basically, IOTA were from the big short list about 2 years ago, pretty much 2 years ago. I think it was 2021 at some point. And then they were drafted down to the last 7, and then they were now drafted into the last 3. So being picked a few months back in part of the phase 1A, I think they called it, or 2A. We'll go into that again in a second's time. But basically they're into the next phase now. This is the final stage, guys, before the implementation, the chosen one, is selected. And we'll look at a couple of the other technologies and projects, or basically the other 2 that were picked for the last stages, and where we think IOTA is going to sit within all of this. And even with or without the EBSI framework and challenge, the fact that IOTA is capable of so many amazing things. If you haven't heard of IOTA before, don't worry, we've got loads of really cool intro videos that I'll leave at the end of this one. Keep an eye out for those. But in general, I'll always give a brief overview of this anyway. So let's go straight into this. So as we mentioned, the next phase is in play now. So the EU blockchain PCP, for those that don't know what that is part of this. European Blockchain's Pre-Commercial Procurement PCP. And this is very much looking at a massive, humongous framework to essentially power the whole of Europe, really. Not saying that it's the exact individual blockchain that's going to be doing anything and everything, because there's a multitude of blockchains out there and technologies that will be incorporated as well. But this is predominantly massively around the entire framework of logistics, supply chain, healthcare, anything related to IoT, which is basically Internet of Things, AI, which is a huge topic right now. I worked in the AI industry for a number of years. It's absolutely fascinating what is to come. Some scary, some just plain right, absolutely amazing to even consider that we'd see this kind of stuff in our lifetime other than films, right? So this is basically what they're going down towards. It's in the second phase. So phase 2B, this is basically the second phase of the second phase, if that makes sense. Phase 1, which I mentioned earlier, was about the 7 that were incorporated or chosen back then. In fact, if I can look at this, really, this might explain it a bit better. So phase 1, which began in 2021, there's a multitude of projects that were picked out for that. I can't remember how many there were, actually. It was like 20 or 30, maybe even more, originally when we first covered this topic. It was one of the first videos we did on the channel, actually. But this then moved towards the final 7 and now the final 3. So we've done phase 2A, which is basically the prototype development and lab testing. And then we're going into phase 2B, which is very much a continuation of that, but then actually now developing and finalizing the field testing and potential incorporation of the whole entire system. So there's a huge opportunity for the winning company to not only get a load of money, which would be very influential in regards to its own individual developments and its criteria that it's trying to push over the next few years, but this incorporation of what's to come for the EU and the world in general, to be honest. We must think about it in a whole world situation, and each one's going to have their own frameworks, their own legislations, regulations, technologies, but at some point they will all be integrated. We talk about things like quant and stuff all the time about interoperability, how blockchains can talk to other blockchains, etc. But for IOTA, it's a really, really special one in my head and in my opinion. With what I know about the AI industry and what I know about the IoT industry, of which I've been very fortunate to work heavily in both those sectors in my career thus far, there are some big things coming, guys. And IOTA has what they call Tangle in the background. Now, Tangle is, to try and explain this simply, unless you want to watch the video that I did on this, which I'll leave at the end of this one, as I said I would. If you can imagine the way the world is moving forward towards, guys, and this is very much for people who don't know much about AI and IoT and this tangle that IOTA can bring to the table. First of all, they're looking at a feeless blockchain scenario in the sense that there's arguably no cost to a transaction. Now, I'm not talking about transactions in terms of monetary value, and I'm sure that would be integrated in some capacities at some point, especially with cross-border payments. That would be a massive influence for sure. But when I'm talking about transactions, I'm talking about any action that basically passes from one decision or request to another. It's like a computer talking to a computer, almost kind of thing, like a peer-to-peer system or whatever it might be. But in this principle, I always use these really interesting examples because these are ones that are on the table right now. I've seen them working hands-on. I'm talking about things like, for example, harvesting and seeding in the agricultural industry automatically based on supply and demand algorithm. And what I mean by that is eventually down the road, take something out of your fridge. The fridge knows that you need to have something else ordered. That tells the system that you usually buy your food from that you need to have that delivered. What delivers that? Maybe a drone. What's the picking service? A robotic arm that goes into the warehouse or the produce center, picks that item, etc. All the way through to the actual harvesting and seeding process based on weather, environmental impacts, decisions based around how many people are buying what and when throughout the year, etc. All of this, right? Every single move, every single part of that process is a transaction, okay? Now, you are not physically sitting there with your debit card and paying for each of these sections, right? You usually pay for the end result, right? Hence why you go to a shop, you buy an item, and that's it. But you don't think about the margins or the costs associated to that product, which is why a lot of people go, oh, that's really expensive. But actually, think of why it's expensive, because all the costs added on throughout that process, whether it's transportation, whether it's logistics, whether it's supply chain, whether it's import, export, whether it's tax, whatever it might be. There's a massive incorporation of monetary value with anything that we buy, anything whatsoever. And it's literally dependent on mass production, supply and demand, all these things, right? That's about elasticity in the economy. That's how it works. But this point in being with the whole aspect of the tangle mechanism, if you like, is that these transactions, we understand that there may be multiple ones within one specific thing, like we just talked about here. However, how do we get them all to work simultaneously within milliseconds? We use blockchain technology. The fact that many of these blockchains can boast things like 20,000 transactions per second, 50,000, everyone's still focused on the fact, oh, that's like quite a lot of transactions, like pounds and dollars, etc. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a massive mechanism, guys, a huge mechanism across the world, across every sector, working simultaneously under one gigantic algorithm, calculation, processing, verification, everything on blockchain, everything. And that was just an agricultural example. Drone deliveries in terms of medication, healthcare in general, being on this. And we look at here's some examples of IOTA. In terms of digital identity is a great example. DIDs are going to be absolutely huge over the next few years, guys. Social media is certainly one of those stepping stones towards that. Biometrics, everything is coming in the next few years, for sure, 100%. As I said, I've worked in these industries. I know they're coming faster than we ever thought they would before. And we've even seen some great examples of them over the last couple of years in our own real worlds right now. Biometric entry points, things like cashless society, the cashless payments, all these things are literally stepping stones to these criteria and these opportunities, which is why when we revert back to this conversation about the EBSI and the protocols that they're trying to put in here, these all have deadlines for this year. Why do they have deadlines for this year? Because they want to incorporate within the next 12 months the whole framework so that by 2025, when the RTGS system, and I'll leave a video about that one at the end of this one as well, the RTGS system gets replaced. We're talking about £720 billion worth per day transactions going through the whole world's RTGS system. It will all be incorporated in blockchain. Anything and everything we do will all be automated AI driven, data driven, and we won't have to touch a thing anymore. It will just happen. You want to have a meeting booked for you. The AI already knows that you're having the meeting done because of the communication and things you've done. It's booked your flights, it's booked your taxis, it's booked your shuttles, everything. And it's booked even time when the taxi will come to your house, pick you up automatically, everything. You don't even need to get your phone out anymore in the next couple of years or a few years to come and pay for these things. It will all be done based on your digital identity. All within blockchain, to know that everything's verified, proceeded, confirmed, processed, and it's all done on your behavioral patterns for the last 10, 20 years based on things you buy or based on the type of accommodations or transport that you like. Everything will be done on this. The energy sector, everything. So when we look about the EBSI, the European Blockchain Services Infrastructure aims to leverage the power of blockchain for the public good. EBSI is an initiative of the European Commission and European Blockchain Partnerships. So this is massive. We've covered this many times. I'm not going into gigantic detail. But the fact of the matter is they're literally throwing it in our face for the last few years. You just maybe haven't realized this is all part of the testing and trialing mechanism for what is to come. Honestly, I've known this for many, many years. I was amazed that a lot of it was pulled off over the last couple of years, but it's literally a trial and error process right now, guys. Stimulus pays, furlough, everything was all part of this mechanism to see how people react, how can they integrate things and work it towards it. And it's absolutely fascinating. I find it a massively interesting topic. And even in here, about the European Blockchain's Pre-Commercial Procurement, PCP, very much exactly what I've just said. Smart contracts, exchanges utilizing the likes of IoT and AI algorithms, everything will be through these systems. And which one will be picked? Well, we know that IOTA is one of the top projects considered, certainly for the European Union at least. I'm not counting that for other areas of the world because they'll have their own infrastructure and systems. It's almost like we're fully regionalizing everything, really, towards this one unified government, one unified system approach, which is something that many people have talked about for a couple of decades now, and we're seeing the transition of that finalizing. Could it be in time for the Agenda 30 program, which obviously ends in 2030? Over 150 countries signed this in 2015. There's a multitude of avenues that agenda program goes through. You can download it off the UN website if you don't believe me. It's all written there. You can plan ahead. I think it's absolutely fascinating. There could be some really bad things that come out of all this, or because some good things. Who knows? The fact of the matter is, from an investments perspective, you have to be really alert and awake to all of these things happening. There is so much to take on board, and hopefully we do try and break that down the best we can. And certainly with some of the projects and things that we invest in. And I'm giving you reasons why I'm invested in this. IOTA is a phenomenal project. Yes, its price point is quite low in my opinion, but you need to look further ahead from that, because if they do get selected by the European Commission, wow. And even with or without that, IOTA has a phenomenal technology behind it. It's something so unique and something quite special in my opinion, that's really going to change the world. In all honesty, I think with these guys, along with like Hedera, for example, you've got Constellation. This is basically Tangle. I call it Tangle. It's very much a DAG system, a Direct Acyclic Graph. And it's the exact principles I just mentioned to you about. If you think about the framework of agriculture, for example, and you buying food or having it replaced automatically by itself, those components don't always have to go in a linear format, i.e. that row of order to get to you. It can bypass things if it needs to do things quicker. And that's how the economy will speed up. That's how efficiency will speed up. And the requirement for humanity won't really be needed much more over these next 10, 20 years because of machine-to-machine learning, AI algorithm, AI data integration, all of these things, right? This is where it gets really interesting, because then basic universal income becomes more apparent and more usable solution to us, as do all the other things as well. So I can't really explain much more than the world is going to change quite dramatically over these next few years. An acceleration that we've never seen before in humanity. The fourth industrial revolution is what the World Economic Forum peers talk about all the time. Klaus Schwab's famous words a couple of years ago were that we are entering the fourth industrial revolution, but this will be in the most quickest, the most advanced, the most superior revolution anyone has ever seen. And arguably, there is a massive argument to say that a lot of it is not human driven anymore. So it's going to be really interesting. We have to think ahead, guys. So I'm not going to waffle on too much more. That's about 15 minutes. I'm trying to reduce the topic and conversation and trying to get to more key points, but hopefully you've learned something here. Quickly before we go into the chart, there are 2 other projects involved with this EU initiative that made the criteria. One being this company here, ChromaWay, who are creating this system here, Chromia, which is a very big DApp system. Again, looking into very specific things like IOTA kind of are doing really as well. There is a token available. I'm going to do a video on this because I think this is a very interesting project and topic to look at, especially if it's one of the critical ones that the EBSI are considering. And these guys have really good partnerships and everything as well. So we'll go into a bit more detail about that in another video. The other one is Billen Group. I don't think these guys have a token. I'm not sure how you would invest in them, but they have massive angel rounds over the last few years. And again, exactly the similar things of IOTA's principles, national currencies in digital format, confidential documents and data. This could be, again, what IOTA kind of partially doing as well in regards to things like, verifications of education, whether it be CV aspects or your actual certification of a diploma or a degree, whatever it might be. And then, there's no falsifying. It's all on blockchain. They don't need to check anything. It's all just systematic. But yeah, Billen Group is absolutely huge, guys. And they're very much catering towards the enterprise level. I put this on kind of like a similar pattern as to what Hyperledger Fabric is about, with the difference being that there's a lot of big players, particularly in the banking industry and the financial industry, already invested or partnered with Billen Group. So keep an eye on this, guys. It's very interesting indeed. As I said, regardless to which one gets picked as the ultimate one, these guys in their own right are going to be having a fantastic journey to follow. And if we can get invested in them along the way, which we can with most of them, absolutely brilliant. But if not, we need to at least see what's going on the other side where we can't invest in directly. So yeah, FIS on here as an example. I think they're dealing with Microsoft, etc. as well. So keep an eye on this, guys. Very interesting indeed. We'll keep you updated as this phase completion occurs. I think there's probably we're probably 9 months away until we know a bit more definitive details about this initiative. I'm surprised it's quite this open. I'm hoping to expect similar principles from what we've seen recently with the proof of concept applications through the UK government for the CBDC system. And by the way, there is a head of CBDC job going for in the civil service entity of the UK government right now. This is how serious it's getting, guys. We're on the brink of massive change. And honestly, like I said a year or so ago, Sunak will be the Prime Minister of the UK, and he became the Prime Minister. He's a massive advocate for crypto and blockchain and CBDCs. I would be very surprised not to see a massive initiative further of CBDCs and integration over the next couple of years. As I said, probably in line with 2025. And don't be surprised either that it's going to be the definitive solution to inflation or removing inflation and things like this forever and utilizing a controlled digital system. The question is, which path will that go down and who will be in charge of it? That's what defines the centralized and decentralized systems and which path we should take as individuals or indeed entities of humanity. So guys, wrap that up there. Let's go into the chart of IOTA, because this has some good moves over the last month, as has most of the market. It's not moved gigantically, I would say, but I still think this is a very reasonable, positive progression of IOTA. So we take this back to the end of December / beginning of January. We're sort of floating around this 16-cent mark. And we've gone relatively up to sort of 24, 25. I'm just going to drag it down a bit because I've missed the bottom slightly. So it's around about 50% increase, which I think is very reasonable for a month's period in terms of the movement here. Now, for me, I was trying to gather as much IOTA as possible down to these areas. I was hoping it would stay down there a bit longer, but it didn't. We've had a great month across crypto in general. But I do believe that we're still testing across the whole market very interesting points across the history of time in most of the asset classes. If you look in IOTA's principles right here, the fib retracement level that we drew in the last video, you can check the old video, I haven't moved anything. We're now bouncing around this particular area here at around this 23-24 cent area. Now, fib retracement lines are never fully accurate, but they certainly give you a great indication. I don't think we're far off at all. So what we're doing right now is we're literally identifying from here, 16th of June last year, 2022, and October last year, respectively. These two, arguably three possibilities, but certainly definitely two, were actually there's one here. Sorry, I missed this one completely. This was a drop down, obviously rejected, took itself back up. We've got one here. There's an argument to say we tried here, but I'm going to focus too much on that. But we've got three really interesting points of areas where we could confirm support. But at some point in a bear market, this was always going to penetrate, and then we'd come back down, and we need to test the low areas that we haven't properly really seen since around November 2019 and through to March and April in 2020. And this was when we last saw the big drop spike. What I'm really intrigued to see, and if this happens, and I do believe March and April this year is going to have some significant changes in crypto and stock markets and everything in general. Interest rates, we've got things like potential recession still coming, growth is shrinking, all of these economic impacts, right? If you look back in history on a lot of the charts, certainly in 2019, as we had this approach of, some stimulus coming in, and what happened in March, everyone announced that we're going into lockdowns and everything like that, and we shot straight down. We shot straight down to these really low numbers. Now, I'm not saying we're coming down to these areas, but it's certainly, for me, in my opinion and my thoughts, I'm not getting too carried away with this uprise. I do think that we're going to have to test these lower regions at some point. So we are currently hitting an area where we're getting a bit of resistance. Why are we getting resistance here? Because we're seeing these previous entry points and certainly recognition of an area of interest. And we can confirm that certainly in the last 2-3 days, maybe even 5 days actually, that this area is of great interest. This is an area where we could potentially start moving up to these next sort of areas of around 26, 27 cents, which is definitely possible. It's not far off at all from where we are right now. But the longevity game for me personally is that I still think we're in a full bear cycle. If we're thinking about the Elliott waves as a prime example, there could be some great opportunities on the way down. Now, I'm not personally buying manually here because I was buying at these lower regions, and I'm just waiting for a bit more of a confirmation as to where we're going. So I have my buy orders back down here at 20 cents, and I still have my buy orders both here in these 15, 16 cent regions, and I still have a big chunk just in case, ready available. I think it's just over 10 cents. I think I've got mine about 12 or 13 cents. So that could potentially still happen, especially if the world goes the way I think it will over the next few months. Who knows? But we have to really apply a method of DCA and a risk assessment here, guys. We can't just insinuate that things are definitely going to happen. We have to work it out for both, 2 or 3 different scenarios. So for me, right now, with the RSIs being so high, 67 and 61 on the 14 and the 28 day respectively, this to me is not too bad, but it's still in that higher region. So I'm thinking, well, if I put money in here, if I was a trader, which I'm not on the IOTA, I'm just accumulating for the future, as many reasons was just mentioned in this video. But for now, if I was a trader, I'd be like, this is a bit top heavy. I need to see some stability first, whether it's at this existing area because we might shoot up again, or I might start anticipating lower areas because there's more opportunity for it to come down than there is upwards. Hence, 67 obviously is nearer 100 than it is to 0, right? So that's the thinking behind this. So we have these categoric areas based on the fib retracements, based on the data from previous months and years as well. Even back here, 2018, this is literally where we are right now, guys, across this board. And in fact, I can quite easily make this more apparent to you guys by drawing in a nice horizontal line exactly where we are right now. Ooh, slightly high, there we go. You can see it clear as day once you look at it from afar. You've got the 3 points here that I mentioned. You've got 1, 2, arguably 3 big significant areas of support back here before we shot straight up. And it's basically a massive interest area, guys. Really huge area. And these lower points here where we hit back here, this matched up with these 2 areas. It's literally a no-brainer here right now. Let me just take that lowest point that we hit, 15 cents. Look at that. Directly, bang on. Rejected in this current area here. Took itself back up eventually within a month or so. And upwards we went. So really interesting movements here. So this is why now we look at these 2 orange lines, we can see a really interesting area of accumulation and sort of different points that we could get to. The worst case scenario is all the way back down here to test these regions again below the 10 cents. But to be honest, between 12 and 9 cents is not hugely significant. I think IOTA's got a massive structure behind it and a lot of confidence, and certainly a lot of investors, especially stakers like myself, that aren't just really not bothered about taking their IOTA tokens out right now, just waiting for the future, building for the future. Everyone's different, everyone's got their own principles, but that's what I'm doing. I'm sure there's many of you out there doing the same, but if you're a trader, for sure, just keep an eye out for these really interesting signal areas and points. The performance wise, it's not massively great compared to a lot of crypto assets. A lot of people ask me, with the likes of this one, XDC, etc., why is the price so low? Why the performance is so bad? You've got to understand where it is in its life cycle, not just from a technology and a project's perspective, but what's its utility and when is that utility coming? We know that IoT's utility is coming very fast, whether that's through a European Commission initiative or something else. The next few years in IoT, AI, DAG systems and blockchain are going to be fundamental for the improvement and the next revolution of humanity, society, the economy, industrial action, everything. So that's the leaving point, guys. Think about it carefully. Like I said, if you haven't heard of IOTA before or heard or invested in that, check out the intro video. I'll leave it at the end of this one. I'll leave the RTGS video after this one as well. But do your own research, guys. This is a phenomenal project. Definitely learn more about Direct Acyclic Graph. If I could fit 3 videos at the end of this one, I would fit in the DAG one as well. But certainly search for it on the channel. I did a massive video on what Direct Acyclic Graph is. Once you understand that more, you understand the evolution of blockchain and certainly the next phase of projects to get invested in if you haven't done so already. Time is now, guys, to research, educate, and build that knowledge because we're running out of time. Guys, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.